I already told you people on the phone. This house is not for sale anymore." The woman in the red blazer stood in the doorway with her arms crossed tight against her chest. Her name was Linda Spacey, and she sold homes in the fancy part of town. She looked at the family on the porch like they were dirt on her clean white steps. Jerry Thompson kept his face calm, and still like a lake with no wind blowing across the water surface. His wife Denise stood next to him, holding the hand of their daughter Zoe, who was only 7 years old that summer. They had driven 40 minutes to see this house after seeing it listed online, just 2 days before this moment happened. "The listing is still active online, and we have an appointment at 3 o'clock today for a showing with you," Jerry said. Linda shook her head and made a sound with her teeth like she was annoyed by a fly buzzing near her face. She pulled out her phone and looked at the screen for a long time, without saying any words to the family. "There must be some mistake because I do not have you down for today at all in my calendar," Linda said. Jerry pulled out his own phone and showed her the email that confirmed the appointment for this exact day and time. The email had her name on it and the address of this house, and everything was spelled out very clearly. Linda looked at the email and then looked back at Jerry, and then looked at the email one more time before speaking again. Her face got tight and her eyes got small, and she took one step back into the house away from them. "Well, the seller changed their mind this morning and took the house off the market, so there is nothing here to see," Linda said. Denise squeezed her daughter's hand and looked at her husband with tired eyes that had seen this kind of thing many times before. But Jerry did not move and did not look away from Linda's face for even one single second. "That is strange because I drove past this house at 9 this morning and saw you showing it to another family," Jerry said. Linda's face went pale like someone had drained all the blood out of it in one quick moment without any warning. She opened her mouth and then closed it, and then opened it again like a fish trying to breathe on dry land. "I do not know what you think you saw, but you must be confused about which house it was," Linda said. "It was this house at 9:15 this morning, and the family had 2 kids and a golden dog in their van," Jerry said. Linda stepped back again and put her hand on the door like she was getting ready to close it in their faces. Her fake smile was gone now, and her real face showed through like a mask that had slipped down just a little bit. "I am going to have to ask you to leave my listing now, or I will call the police on you," Linda said. Jerry nodded slowly and took a business card from his pocket and held it out toward Linda with 2 fingers. She did not take it, so he set it down on the small table by the door where a vase of fake flowers stood. "My name is Jerry Thompson, and I work for the Department of Justice in the Civil Rights Division," Jerry said. The color in Linda's face did not just drain this time, but seemed to disappear completely like a ghost had walked through her. Her hand on the door started to shake just a little bit, and her eyes got very wide and very scared. "I have been investigating fair housing complaints in this county for the past 6 months, and your name keeps coming up," Jerry said. Linda tried to laugh, but the sound came out wrong like a car engine that would not start on a cold winter morning. She looked past Jerry to the street where their car was parked, and then looked back at his face again. "This is crazy because I treat all my clients the same no matter what color they are or where they come from," Linda said. Jerry reached into his jacket and pulled out a small folder that was thick with papers and photos and printed records. He opened it and showed her the first page, which had her photo and her license number on it clearly. "In the past year alone, you have shown this neighborhood to 47 white families and 0 black families," Jerry said. "That is just how the numbers worked out, and it does not mean anything at all about how I do business," Linda said. Jerry turned to the next page, which showed a list of names and dates and addresses all typed out in neat rows. Each line had a note next to it that described what had happened during each phone call or visit. "The Johnson family called you in March, and you told them the house on Oak Street was already under contract," Jerry said. "But you showed that same house to the Miller family 2 days later, and they bought it for full asking price last month." Linda grabbed the door frame like she might fall down if she did not hold onto something solid and strong. Her red blazer did not look so sharp anymore, and her perfect hair seemed to sag a little bit now. The Williams family came to see the house on Pine Road in April, and you told them the neighborhood had a lot of crime, Jerry said. But that neighborhood has had 0 crimes reported in the past 5 years according to police records I pulled last week. Those are all just coincidences, and you are twisting everything around to make me look bad, Linda said. Denise spoke up for the first time since they had arrived at the house, and her voice was calm and steady. She was not playing a role like her husband was because she was just a mother who wanted a good home. We have been looking for a house in a good school district for 2 years now, and this happens every single time, Denise said. Little Zoe looked up at the woman in the red blazer and asked a question that only a child would think to ask. Her voice was small and clear like a bell, ringing in a quiet church on Sunday morning. "Why do you not want us to live here with the other families in this nice neighborhood?" Zoe asked. Linda looked down at the child, and for one moment, her hard face seemed to crack just a tiny little bit. But then she looked back at Jerry, and the folder in his hand, and her face got hard again. "I want you off this property right now before I call my lawyer and have you arrested for harassment," Linda said. Jerry closed the folder and put it back in his jacket and took one step back from the door. He looked at Linda with eyes that were not angry, but were very serious and very focused on her face. "You can call whoever you want, but I want you to know that I am filing a formal complaint tomorrow morning," Jerry said. "This complaint will go to the State Real Estate Board, and they will review your license within 30 days. Linda slammed the door so hard that the fake flowers in the vase fell over and spilled their fake water on the floor. Jerry turned and walked down the steps with his wife and daughter beside him, still holding hands. They got in their car and drove away from the house on the tree-lined street with all its perfect lawns and clean sidewalks. No one spoke for a long time because there was nothing new to say about something so old and tired. "Are we ever going to find a house where people want us to live?" Zoe asked from the back seat. Denise turned around and smiled at her daughter, even though her eyes were wet with tears she would not let fall. She reached back and held her daughter's hand and squeezed it tight with all her love inside that squeeze. "Yes, baby, we are going to find the perfect house, and no one is going to stop us from living there," Denise said. Jerry looked at his daughter in the mirror and made a promise to himself that he would keep no matter what happened next. He had been patient for a long time, but now it was time to use his real power for his own family. The next morning, Jerry walked into his office at the federal building downtown and sat down at his desk covered in case files. His boss, Janet Chen, knocked on his door and came in with 2 cups of coffee in her hands. "I heard you went to see the Spacey woman yesterday, and that it did not go so well for anyone involved," Janet said. "She slammed the door in my face after I told her who I was and what I do for a living," Jerry said. Janet set one coffee cup on his desk and sat down in the chair across from him and took a long, slow sip. She was a small woman with gray hair and glasses, but she had put away more bad actors than anyone else in the division. "You know the rules about mixing personal matters with official investigations and how careful we have to be," Janet said. "I do know the rules, but my family has been trying to buy a house for 2 years with no luck," Jerry said. Janet nodded and looked at the stack of files on his desk that all had Linda Spacey's name on them somewhere. She picked up the top file and opened it and read the first page, and then closed it again. "We have been building this case for 6 months, and we have enough evidence to move forward now," Janet said. "I want to be the one who serves her the papers when the time comes to make it all official," Jerry said. Janet looked at him for a long time without saying anything, and then she nodded her head just one time slowly. She stood up and walked to the door and turned around with her coffee cup still in her hand. "Get the paperwork ready and have it on my desk by Friday morning, and we will move next week," Janet said. Jerry spent the rest of that week putting together the biggest fair housing case his office had ever seen in its history. He gathered statements from 15 families who had all been turned away by Linda Spacey for the same reason. He collected phone records that showed Linda using different voices when she talked to people with different sounding names. He found emails where she told other agents to steer certain families away from certain neighborhoods, no matter what. The case was so strong that it made Jerry sick to his stomach to read all the things Linda had done. But he kept working because he knew that justice was coming soon, and it would be delivered by his own hand. On Friday morning, he put the finished file on Janet's desk, and she read through it for 2 hours without stopping. When she was done, she looked up at him with a face that was both proud and sad at the same time. This is the most complete housing discrimination case I have ever seen in my 20 years doing this work, Janet said. We are going to take everything she has and make sure she never sells another house again. Jerry felt something lift off his shoulders that he had been carrying for a very long time without even knowing it. He went home that night and told Denise that things were about to change for their family and for many others too. The next Monday morning, Jerry put on his best suit and drove to the real estate office where Linda Spacey worked. He carried a thick envelope in his hand that contained the federal lawsuit and all its attachments and supporting documents. Linda was sitting at her desk, talking on the phone when Jerry walked through the front door of the office. She looked up and saw him and her face went white, and she hung up the phone without saying goodbye. You cannot be here because this is my place of work and you are harassing me again, Linda said. Jerry walked over to her desk and set the envelope down right in front of her keyboard where she could not ignore it. He did not smile and he did not frown, but just looked at her with calm, steady eyes. Linda Spacey, you are being served with a federal lawsuit for violations of the Fair Housing Act of 1968, Jerry said. This lawsuit names you personally and your brokerage firm and seeks damages of $5 million. Linda's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out because there were no words that could help her now. The other agents in the office had stopped working and were all staring at the scene happening by her desk. You have 30 days to respond to this lawsuit through your attorney or a default judgment will be entered against you, Jerry said. This is not fair because I was just doing my job the way everyone else does it around here, Linda said. Jerry shook his head slowly and pointed to the envelope that Linda had not yet picked up or opened to read. His voice was quiet, but everyone in the office could hear every word he said perfectly clear. What you were doing was breaking the law and hurting families who just wanted a safe place to live, Jerry said. And now you are going to answer for all of it in a court of law in front of a judge and jury. The news of the lawsuit spread through the town like fire through dry grass on a hot summer day with no rain. People talked about it at the grocery store and the coffee shop and the school pickup line every single day. Linda Spacey hired the best lawyer in town, who charged $500 an hour for his time and his advice. But even he told her that the case against her was very strong and she might want to settle before trial. I am not going to admit that I did anything wrong because I did not do anything wrong, Linda told her lawyer. Her lawyer, whose name was Robert Hayes, looked at the stack of evidence and shook his head with a worried face. He had been practicing law for 30 years, but he had never seen a case this bad for his own client. They have phone recordings where you tell other agents to, quote, keep those people out of the good neighborhoods, Robert said. How do you explain that to a jury who will hear it played in the courtroom? Linda sat in the leather chair in her lawyer's fancy office and crossed her arms like a child who would not eat her vegetables. She did not want to hear what he was saying because it meant she would have to change her whole story. I was just talking the way everyone talks, and I did not mean anything bad by those words, Linda said. The jury will not see it that way, and neither will the judge who has already read the complaint, Robert said. Meanwhile, Jerry was at home with his family eating dinner at the kitchen table like they did every night of the week. Zoe was talking about her day at school, and Denise was laughing at something funny the girl had said. The phone rang, and Jerry got up to answer it, because it might be something important about the case. On the other end was a man's voice. He did not know asking to speak with him about a private matter. My name is James Whitfield, and I am the owner of Whitfield Realty where Linda Spacey works, the man said. Jerry took the phone into the other room where he could talk without his family, hearing every word he said. He sat down on the couch and waited for the man to say whatever he had called to say. I want you to know that I did not know what Linda was doing until your lawsuit made it all public, James said. That may be true, but your company is still named in the suit because you are responsible for your agents, Jerry said. James was quiet for a moment, and then he spoke again with a voice that sounded tired and maybe a little bit scared. He was a man who had built his business for 40 years, and now it might all fall apart. I want to make this right, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to fix the harm that was done, James said. Jerry listened as James offered to pay for the settlement himself, and to fire Linda, and to change all the policies at his company. He offered to give money to fair housing groups, and to train all his agents on the law. These are good offers, but they need to be in writing and reviewed by my office before we can agree to anything, Jerry said. I will have my lawyer send everything over tomorrow morning first thing before anyone else gets to work, James said. The next week, there was a meeting at the federal building, with lawyers from both sides sitting around a big, long table. Jerry was there with Janet, and 2 other attorneys from the Civil Rights Division ready to talk. Linda was there with Robert, and James was there with his own lawyer whose name was Patricia something or other. Everyone had folders and papers and pens, and serious faces ready for hard work. We are here to discuss a possible settlement of this case before it goes to trial next month, Janet said. Robert spoke first and laid out what Linda was willing to do, which was not very much at all really. She would agree to take some classes and pay a small fine, but she would not admit that she did anything wrong. That is not acceptable because we have evidence of over 50 violations of federal law over 5 years, Janet said. The room got very quiet, and everyone looked at their papers, and no one wanted to speak next. Jerry watched Linda's face and saw that she still did not understand how much trouble she was in right now. The families who were harmed deserve real justice, and not just a slap on the wrist for the person who hurt them, Jerry said. James cleared his throat and spoke up even though his lawyer had told him to stay quiet during the meeting. He was an old man with white hair and a face that showed he had lived through many hard times before. I am prepared to offer $2 million to settle this case and to fund fair housing programs in this county, James said. Linda turned to look at James with a face full of shock and anger that she did not try to hide at all. She had worked for him for 15 years, and now he was throwing her under the bus to save himself. You cannot do this to me because I made you rich with all the houses I sold for your company, Linda said. James looked at her with sad eyes, but his voice was firm and steady when he spoke his next words clearly. He had made a choice, and he was going to stick with it no matter what Linda said or did. You broke the law and you lied about it, and now you have to face what you did to all those families, James said. The meeting went on for 3 more hours with offers and counter-offers going back and forth across the table. By the end of the day, they had reached an agreement that everyone could live with except for Linda. The settlement required Linda to give up her real estate license forever and never work in housing again in her life. She had to pay $200,000 of her own money to the families she had hurt over the years. James and his company had to pay $1.5 million to a fund for fair housing in the county. They had to change all their policies and train all their agents and report to the government every year. But the most important part of the settlement was what happened next for the Thompson family and others like them. The company had to show houses to any family that asked without any screening or steering or games. 1 month later, Jerry and Denise and Zoe drove back to the same neighborhood, where Linda had slammed the door in their faces. This time, they were meeting a new agent named Carlos, who had just finished his fair housing training. Welcome to the neighborhood, and I am so happy to show you this beautiful home that just came on the market, Carlos said. The house was even nicer than the one Linda had refused to show them, with 4 bedrooms and a big backyard for Zoe. The kitchen had new appliances, and the bathrooms had been updated, and everything was clean and bright. Zoe ran through the house looking at every room and every closet and every window with excited eyes and a big smile. She found a room that looked out over the backyard, where she could see birds and trees and sky. "Can this be my room, please, because I can see the whole world from this window right here?" Zoe asked. Denise looked at Jerry, and they both smiled, because they knew this was the house they had been searching for. It was not just walls and floors and a roof, but a place where their family could grow and be happy. They made an offer that same day, and the seller accepted it the next morning without any problems at all. The sale went through in 30 days, and they moved in on a Saturday when the weather was warm and sunny. The neighbors came over one by one to welcome them and bring food and help carry boxes into the house. An old woman named Mrs. Patterson brought a pie and told them she was glad to have a family with a child. "This street has been too quiet for too long, and it will be nice to hear a little girl playing outside," Mrs. Patterson said. Jerry stood on his new front porch and watched his daughter run around the yard with the neighbor kids following behind. He thought about all the families who had been turned away from homes like this for no good reason. 3 months later, the local news did a story about the lawsuit and what had changed because of it in the county. They interviewed Jerry and Denise and some of the other families who had been helped by the settlement. "We just wanted a chance to live in a good neighborhood with good schools like any other family," Denise said. The reporter also talked to Linda Spacey, who was now working at a retail store, because no one would hire her for anything else. She still said she had done nothing wrong, and that she was the real victim in all of this. "My life was ruined by people who wanted to make an example out of me for something everyone does," Linda said. But the reporter also showed the numbers that proved what had really changed since the lawsuit was filed and settled. In the past 3 months alone, the number of black families buying homes in that county had gone up by 40%. The Fair Housing Fund had helped 20 families with down payments and closing costs and legal fees when they needed it. New agents were being trained every month on how to follow the law and treat everyone the same. 1 year later, Jerry got a letter in the mail from a woman he had never met but whose name he knew from his files. Her name was Angela Washington, and she had been one of the families Linda had turned away 3 years before. The letter said that Angela and her husband had just bought their first home in a neighborhood they had always wanted to live in. They had 2 kids now, and the kids had their own rooms and a yard to play in after school. "I wanted to thank you for fighting for all of us who could not fight for ourselves," Angela wrote. "Because of what you did, my children will grow up in a place where they belong and where they are wanted." Jerry put the letter in a frame and hung it on the wall in his office where he could see it every day. He had many files on his desk with many cases still waiting to be worked on, but this letter was special. Denise came into his office and saw the letter and read it, and then hugged her husband without saying any words. They stood there for a long time holding each other and thinking about how far they had come together. "Do you think things will ever really change, or will we always have to keep fighting like this?" Denise asked. Jerry looked out the window at the street where kids were playing and neighbors were talking, and life was going on. He thought about his daughter and her future, and the world she would grow up in if things kept moving forward. "I think every fight we win makes the next fight a little bit easier for the people who come after us," Jerry said. That night at dinner, Zoe asked her parents what the letter on the wall was about because she had seen them looking at it. Jerry and Denise looked at each other and decided their daughter was old enough to understand part of the story. "Do you remember the woman who would not let us see that house when you were 7 years old?" Denise asked. "Yes, I remember, because she was mean, and she made me sad, and I did not understand why," Zoe said. "Well, your father made sure that she could not be mean to any more families ever again in her whole life," Denise said. Zoe thought about this for a moment, and then she smiled and looked at her father with proud eyes and a full heart. She was only 8 years old, but she understood that her father had done something important and good. "Is that why we live in this nice house now with the big yard and the birds I can see from my window?" Zoe asked. "Yes, baby, that is exactly why we live here now, and why other families like ours can live here too," Jerry said. The family finished their dinner and cleaned up the kitchen and watched a movie together on the couch in their new living room. Outside, the sun was going down, and the street lights were coming on one by one all down the block. In houses up and down, that street families of all kinds were doing the same things at the same time that evening. Some were eating dinner, and some were doing homework, and some were just sitting together being a family. This was what Jerry had fought for, and what he would keep fighting for, until there was nothing left to fight about anymore. Not power or fame or money, but just the simple right to live where you want to live. Linda Spacey would never sell another house, and would never have the chance to hurt another family looking for a home. The law had done its job and justice had been served, and the world was a little bit better than before. But Jerry knew there were more Linda Spaceys out there in other towns and other states doing the same things every day. His work was not done, and might never be done, but that was okay, because the work itself was worth doing. He looked at his wife and his daughter and his new house, and he felt something that he had not felt in a very long time. He felt like he was home and like he belonged here, and like no one could ever take that away from him. And that feeling was worth more than any lawsuit or any settlement or any headline in the paper could ever be worth. That feeling was what justice really meant when you stripped away all the words and the lawyers and the courts. It meant coming home at the end of the day to a place where you were wanted and where you could be yourself. It meant watching your child grow up in a safe place with good schools and friendly neighbors all around. It meant knowing that when someone tried to shut a door in your face, you had the power to open it back up. And it meant using that power not just for yourself, but for all the people who would come after you. Jerry turned off the lights and carried Zoe up to her room with the window that looked out over the backyard. He tucked her in and kissed her forehead and stood in the doorway for just a moment before going to bed. "Good night, Daddy, and thank you for getting us this house where we belong," Zoe said. "Good night, baby, and you are very welcome, and I love you more than all the stars in the sky," Jerry said. He closed her door and walked down the hall to his own room, where Denise was already waiting for him under the covers. They lay there in the dark, listening to the quiet sounds of their house and their street and their life. Tomorrow there would be more work to do, and more fights to fight, and more families who needed help getting what was theirs. But tonight there was peace, and there was love, and there was the simple joy of being home at last.